Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Today we have another set of great stories about crazy people and their revenge. But before we start, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story is, one year they decided they'd withhold bonuses. This is how I handled it. I was working for a financial firm, 1,800 employees with a sales force of 200. I was one of the salesmen. We had our annual meeting in April, and it was a big affair. Most of the employees attended, and the CEO gave a big speech about how the previous year was the best in company history, blah, blah, blah. The next month, May, we each submitted memos basically justifying why we qualified for, or should qualify for, bonuses at the end of June. I wrote mine out and explained the sales growth in my territory over the course of the previous 12 months and what percentage my sales were out of last year's total sales. Coming off the company's best year ever, it should have been a slam dunk, right? All of us were excited about how much we'd have coming in June. Well, June rolls around and my bonus is zero. Zero! But it's not just me, it's all over the sales floor. Less than 20% of the sales force got bonuses. Holy crap, everybody was PO'd. All the supervisors were dealing with angry subordinates, the sales manager was too, and even the VP and director above him. Everyone was furious and insubordinate. Angry, accusatory emails were flying, and the company was facing a mutiny. It got worse when it came out that the supervisors were offered bonuses that they could determine for themselves. Most of them took them, but a couple, knowing their subordinates wouldn't be getting anything, refused. My supervisor took his. When it came out, he tried to explain to his sales team about how he felt it was justified and how hard he worked. He ended up with people screaming at him about how they felt the same, but they didn't get jack crap. So for a week or so, things on the floor came to a stop. A lot of people just didn't show up, and the ones that did were angry. I came in and started reading Monster.com ads at my desk. I also stopped selling anything or answering my phone. When confronted by my boss, I told him that as soon as I got the bonus my sales justified, I'd start working again. Until then, I'd be coming in late, reading and responding to one ads, and leaving early. He could expect me to keep that up until I found another job or was fired. The following day, I was sent to the regional sales manager's office. She said she'd heard about my work stoppage and asked me to explain myself. I told her that if she heard about it from my supervisor, then she already knew why I wasn't working and I didn't need to explain it again. She tried buddying up to me, being friendly, then being stern, then being angry. I kept my composure and told her that the longer the company held out on my bonus, the longer it was going to miss out on sales from my territory. I then gave her my average daily amount of sales from the previous year, quantified what the total loss would be for a week of me not selling, and how much cheaper it would be just to pay me the money I was owed and get me back to selling. I then thanked her for her time and told her I'd be leaving work as soon as I left her office. And I did. The following day I came in, checked my email, some of which were farewell emails from coworkers who'd quit over their stolen bonuses, and sat on Monster.com until I was told to go to the office of the national sales manager. He's the gatekeeper. He's in charge of all 200 of us. He told me he understood that I was upset and could see why. I asked him if withholding the bonuses from 80% of his sales force was his idea or someone else's. He didn't answer. He did tell me that I would be getting a check on Monday, and could I please go back to work now? I told him I'd be going back to my desk, but work wouldn't start until the check was in my hand. When I went back and checked my emails, more defections. The next day, an email went out to the entire sales force. Management had taken a look at the numbers, reevaluated the financials, and determined that June bonuses would be issued shortly. The email also apologized for the delay and reminded us that as salesmen, we were the core of the company and our hard work was appreciated. I also received another email, this time from the national sales manager, who told me while bonuses were scheduled for Monday, he'd be walking my check to my desk the following day. Following day, I showed up, sat down. Shortly afterwards, the national sales manager walked up and handed me my bonus check. I thanked him and handed him my resignation effective immediately. In my resignation letter, I requested that a check for my unused vacation time please be cut and given to me before I left the building. When he finished reading it, I told him I'd clean out my desk while I waited for the vacation check. While I was doing that, one of my coworkers also resigned effective immediately. We were walked out at the same time and ended up getting drunk at the bar across the street. I learned later from coworkers that remained that even though the company issued the bonuses, they lost about 20% of the sales force in the following 2 months. Gotta love corporate greed. Edit. The money was referred to in all the paperwork as a bonus. However, it was compensation based on a predetermined formula. You sell X amount, you get X bonus. You sell Y amount, you get Y bonus. It wasn't one amount, it was set at different tiers. It was a predetermined formula in black and white. Everyone on the sales floor had a copy. If you didn't make your bonus, you knew exactly why, and by what amount you missed it. The company had been around for over 30 years by then and was known for generous compensation and had never before played games with bonuses or payments. And our next story. CEO voids a verbal agreement. Enjoy the new union. 25 years ago, I worked 7 nights a week as a driver, subcontracted to the local newspaper to deliver bundles to stores and carriers. At 18, I was the youngest driver with his own route, having first been brought in by a family friend when I was 16 as a spare driver, then moving up. My days were at college studying comp sci or working computer repair jobs. Verbal agreement gets voided. The rural route I was offered had the greatest number of kilometers with a relatively lower number of newspapers compared to other routes. I made an agreement with the manager, bought a heavy-duty cargo van which had been converted to run on propane, far cheaper back then got to work. Most other trucks would not have made a profit doing this route. After several months on the job, I was called into the office by the CEO of a distribution company who was mad that I'd been getting paid more for my kilometers in comparison to the in-city routes. The manager backed me up, saying he'd okayed the rate to balance out the longer hours with fewer bundles. The CEO yelled at the manager in front of the whole office and asked if there was a signed contract to state the agreed terms. When the manager admitted it was a verbal contract, the CEO said it then didn't count and was void. I get organized. Stuck with having to pay off the cargo van, and I really did enjoy the job itself, I kept at it, but documented everything, including all negotiations, calls, asking me to come in early, requests to set the order of my route, times waiting at press, times entering and leaving loading bay, who was before and after me, route completion times, return home times, fuel costs, kilometers driven, and press breakdowns. 6 months later, I wanted to take some time off but was refused. None of the company's spares would agree to do my route since it cost them too much in time and fuel. Working 7 nights a week gets draining. I threatened to quit and the company relented, agreeing to pay the spare miles, but not by me. The situation made me madder than ever and I started reading. I get organizing. I learned the magical difference between a dependent and an independent contractor, and how a dependent contractor is granted many of the same rights as employees, like overtime and holiday pay. I knew this was a temporary job for me, but I was PO'd enough to devote a large amount of my time to make the owner pay. I filed a comprehensive personal employment standards complaint using all those records I'd been keeping. Plus, I offered my records to around 10 other drivers who followed my lead into filing their own complaints. A key part of my records was proving how much control the company had on how we performed our jobs. Talk of unionizing was always in the background, but it was at this point I joined the cause with a fervor. We attracted one of the country's largest unions who devoted a fair amount of resources to backing us even before they were voted in. My records went to the union, who referred to them consistently. Because I had years of spare experience, I also had in-depth knowledge of many of the other routes and the lopsided pay. I helped convince several of the other drivers to join up, including some of the spares. Forming a union is a long process, so be aware there were multiple votes interspersed with the events below, and each vote favoring the union position. There were also several other enthusiastic organizers who were tired of how things were. The company fights back. The company played hardball and went after us on multiple fronts. A number of union-friendly spares were fired, drivers lost their routes due to strategic amalgamations, and I was let go under the excuse that I had less seniority than the CEO's son-in-law, who'd worked as a spare a couple of times over the last few years. My own departure didn't last long. The newspaper itself demanded I be put back on my route following major problems and delays from the son-in-law doing it, bad drops, loads of complaints by carriers and customers. The union filed complaints to the labor board calling it obvious union busting. I filed a complaint to the Employment Standards Tribunal, which had been set up for my personal case. Since the company had played the seniority card, it was determined I had greater seniority than a number of company men, given I had worked as a spare since I was 16. The labor board said I should be given the opportunity to bump any of those with less seniority and take their route. Both the company and union asked me not to pursue this if I agreed to an immediate increase to my current route and to be paid for all days missed. I agreed. Negotiations pay off. Now, 2 years later from the start of my story, negotiations were still ongoing, but several interim agreements had been reached. A universal pay algorithm was agreed on, with drivers receiving back pay to when the negotiation started. I received one of the biggest checks. One thing I did not agree to was to let the union negotiate away my employment standards complaint. I was the lone holdout here, so as such, I had equal standing in some labor board tribunals with CEO and union negotiators. I will always relish the disdain the CEO had for me at those meetings, to the point of placing his briefcase on the negotiating table to block my view of him, and me reclining back ever so slowly in those nice comfy chairs to grin at him while offering water. The Employment Standards Tribunal determined I was a dependent contractor. They awarded me everything I'd asked for and more, including penalties and interest. They made a point to mention how egregiously the company had behaved after the complaint had first been submitted. The dependent contractor determination greatly strengthened the union's position for future negotiations. I move on to my career and steak. I quit shortly afterwards since I'd finished with college and was full into the tech world. It did take a couple more years for the company to finally agree to pay the full amount awarded. The CEO delayed it as long as he could. Every few months, I refused lowball settlement offers. That final check with his personal signature paid off my student loans and a steak dinner. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.